We are now live.
Good afternoon and happy Friday. My name is Mark Watkins, and I would like to welcome you and thank you for joining us for Neurodiversity Part 2, a program developed by the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee. As you know, we have been working on developing programs that are relevant to you and your firms to help you be better leaders in your function. A special thanks to Stacy Chambers of Strategic Spaces and Gretchen Barron from the Massachusetts Medical Society for helping to develop these programs. As we know, study after study shows that firms and individuals that embrace EID are significantly more successful. There are different acronyms out there. Some weave in justice, others are pushing for a sense of belonging, which is also incredibly important. But regardless, we are, in the words of Spike Lee, doing the right thing. We have two fantastic panelists today, Kay Sargent and Carol Simpson, who Gretchen will introduce shortly. But before doing so, we have a few housekeeping items to go over. We are recording this program so that it will be available on the Cornet New England website in the future. So some upcoming events. On May 12th, we've got Maintaining Company Culture. May 14th, What's Next in Workplace Wellness. Of course, we've got the Cornet Eastern Regional Symposium on May 17th, which I know a lot of people have signed up for, and if you haven't, strongly encourage you to do so. On May 18th, we've got an access lunch for the young leaders with Jean Nutt at Gensler. On May 25th, we have got a bar Zoom trivia, which I believe is also for the young leaders. And then on May 27th, we've got Creating the Wow Factor, Force Point's Client Experience Center, which I believe Chris Stahl is going to be leading. So some exciting CRAVE programs that will be coming up that we encourage you to look into. For the ERS, we've got the Young Leader Forum that will be taking place from 12 o'clock to 1:15 on May 17th. And Kristen Enright of Thermo Fisher actually is also going to be participating in that. And you can see some of the other panelists on this slide. The general session will be from 3:05 through 3:45. We've got Sam Schaefer and Edward Glaser that will be helping to lead that. And then from 4 o'clock to 4:45, Reframe on the corporate level with a couple of other speakers and panelists. And then that will be followed by Reframe individual level, led by Steve Weichel, as well as Kay and Douglas. So please follow us on social media. We are very active, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Any communications that you would like to share, please email Stephen Smith at Northstar, and he'll be sure to include that in future announcements. Big thank you for our corporate partners that are able to help make these programs possible. And to our sponsors. We have our platinum level sponsors here and our gold and silver here. A big thank you to all of them, and without their support, these programs would not be possible. If you have a question during the program, we ask that you use the Q&A icon at the bottom of the page and not the chat. And we will be monitoring that, and we'll try to answer all of your questions. And with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Gretchen to introduce you to today's speakers.
Thank you, Mark, as always, for a fabulous introduction. I wanted to remind everyone that this is the second session in our series focused on neurodiversity, and many of the questions that our panelists will be discussing today came out of the Real Advantage dinner that we had in March. So while we may cover some questions that you might have, please feel free to put them in the Q&A if you have additional questions. We'll be joined today by two of our experts who participated in the first session of our Neurodiversity in the Workplace programming, Kay Sargent, who is an internationally renowned speaker and a senior principal and director of workplace at HOK, and Carol Simpson, who's the executive director of Orbital Learning and a subject matter expert on autism in the workplace. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. We will be using the Mentimeter platform, and some folks find that it's easier to have their Mentimeter open on one. There are some interactive polls and questions, so you may want to, Stacy will be putting that slide up in a moment. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, how are you today?
Good.
Yes, hello.
It's Friday, so we should all be in a good mood, right?
Yeah, so if everyone notices at the top of the page, www.menti.com, and then the code to access the questions today is 53514989. We will have a number of questions and interactive polling for us. Our first question is, did you attend or watch part 1 of our series on neurodiversity?
Well, I know Carol and I were there.
Yeah,
So we would vote yes if we could. And we're excited to be back for round 2. We usually don't get to elaborate to this degree, so we're really excited to have the opportunity to do so and to address some of the questions that have come up since the first session.
And again, just for anyone at the top is the link menti.com, MENTI, and the code to access this session is 53514989. And part 1 was held in March and followed by the Real Advantage dinner. If you'd like more information about the Real Advantage dinners, please let Stacy or I know. We could put you in touch with the folks who coordinate those. Are our results coming through, Stacy?
We're not actually getting any results. So I think perhaps we'll go right to your question.
Perfect. So the first question for our panelist is, how can you demonstrate the financial benefits of using neurodiverse staff? Carol, you want to take this one?
Yeah, certainly. So what we have found with our clients is that we start out by looking at the big picture benefits, and then we look at what other organizations have experienced. And so speaking in general terms, the big picture benefits, for the person on the spectrum or neurodiverse individual, is that they move from living a subsistence life to one in which they can participate in all social constructs. And that's something that most of us take for granted. And so they participate in a life that is rich with options, just as the rest of us do. The other is that from our economy perspective, is that these individuals go from dependency on state benefits to contributors, paying taxes and exercising their buying power in the marketplace. And then the third, from a cultural perspective, is that by becoming more inclusive, we become a kinder society. Now, the benefits to employers is that the statistics show that those employers who neurodiversify are 2 times more likely to meet or exceed financial targets. So in other words, it hits the bottom line. in a very positive way. They're 6 times more likely to be innovative because they have had to become innovative internally through their management practices. They're 6 times more likely to anticipate market changes, so they become more nimble in their thinking. They experience 140% productivity in those people who are neurodiverse. And that affects all the employees. As one of our clients said, it caused their internal employees to become more productive. And the way they put it was pull up their socks. It decreases turnover, which is an interesting outcome in that employees actually feel more loyal to an organization that has a social agenda and actually walks the talk. It attracts millennials for the exact same reason, and it improves morale. Okay.
So I'm just going to chime in and just say that, listen, if 1 in 7 people are considered neurodiverse, that means that you already have people that are neurodiverse on your staff. And so the question is, are you getting the most out of the individuals that you already have? And are you setting everybody else up for success? I also think that we have a duty, and I don't use that word lightly. We are duty bound and a moral responsibility to create spaces that are truly welcoming and inviting. And this issue of neurodiversity, and just, everyone I think now is living in a world where we all kind of have a heightened sensitivity. It's the right thing to do, not just for the neurodiverse population, but for the population in general. And I'll give you one more stat to add on to some of the things that Carol shared. One organization that identified and set up a program specifically around hiring individuals with autism who are on the spectrum to do coding found that they were 92% more effective than their coworkers. Think about that, 92% more effective. So the question is, can you afford not to do it? I would say I'd flip the question around.
I want to add to that, Kay, in that if a person comes forward and they've got the right skill sets and the right attitude toward employment, why wouldn't we hire them?
Agreed. Oh, we got another poll. Okay.
Here we go, another
I
poll.
hope
in the
everybody's on
Menti.
the
Let's hope this
Menti.
one works. Does your company require business cases for hiring any talent group, neurodiverse or otherwise?
I think the interesting thing about this question is, and I'm going to make a prediction here. You'll probably get a lot of I don't knows, but I think most companies decide that they want a certain skill set, but don't necessarily always equate that with a specific group of individuals. And I find it fascinating that in all the research that we did, 65% of the people in the United States, the adults in the United States that are on the neurodiverse spectrum or scale, have above average intelligence. These are really, really smart people, but 85% of them are underemployed or not employed at all. And a lot of this, I think, has to do with the environments that we are creating and or not setting people up for success as we go forward.
Yes, and to add to that stat, Kay, that the average income of those people who are employed, who are neurodiverse, their median income is below the poverty line.
So it appears that our connection to the Menti isn't going to show up live on the screen. So we'll catch up later with that, but we'll continue to take the polls and send those out post. So let's move to the next question.
Thanks, Stacy.
Ladies, can you share some different ways that companies are approaching their neurodiversity initiatives?
Yes, I can start that one off. So back when neurodiversity first kind of became a known entity in the business community, many large organizations were going with the cohort model. And that's where they hire a group of people from a certain talent group, such as autism, and bring the people in as a group. Well, that has changed, and for the better. And so what we're moving toward is that you've got a job opening, you bring in the best talent for that job opening, and that person may be neurodiverse. Now, what we have found is that those organizations that hire neurodiverse individuals and do not get expert support while they do that may run into some challenges initially, only because they're new to neurodiversity. So we recommend that you bring someone, an expert support service in while you are learning how to neurodiversify. And what organizations do is that some of them, with that support, expert support, they hire the employee directly, or they will contract the employee initially and then move the person into permanent employment. Eventually, over time, as they become more adept at hiring people who are neurodiverse, they will then look at re-engineering their hiring and retention processes to become much more inclusive. Okay, would you like to add to that?
And I'd add in, you know, most of our research that we've done, we found a lot that talks about operationalizing and onboarding and you know, the initial hiring process. We found very, very little, quite frankly, almost nothing about what we need to do to create the environments that will support the individuals to set them up for success. And I want to go back to, in the first session, there was a great quote that said, from one of the autistic students that we interviewed, that said, "We are freshwater fish in salt water. If you put us in fresh water, or fresh water, we'll function just fine. If you put us in salt water, we'll struggle to survive." That's, I think, really essential. It's not just enough to onboard and to bring diverse people and individuals into your organization. You have to set them up for success. And there are some space modifications that we would recommend, that we talked a lot about in the first session, things that we can do to set everybody up for success going forward. And I think that's where we probably need a lot more effort, and where we see very little initiatives within a lot of our companies. Now, I will say that several companies are starting to address that now, and they're also starting to address some of the bigger issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we need to do that, because the built environment absolutely has an impact on the individuals in it. And I think we're at a point now where something really significant just happened, and I don't think most people paid attention to it. The World Health Organization has redefined the way that, kind of the definition around somebody with a disability or individuals with disabilities. And it used to say that a person had a physical disability. Okay. Now they're noting that the issue or challenge is when a person with a physical disability is encountering an environment that doesn't support them. That's where the problem lies, because you can't control the individual, what they have or don't have, and their specific situation, but you can control the environment. And so it totally shifted the focus from the problem is the person has a disability to the problem is the environment doesn't support them. And that puts the onus on the real estate community. And that was not lost on us when they changed that. And it seems very subtle, but basically what it's doing is it's making it our problem.
And Kay, I want to add to that, because those are excellent points, is that you can also take that attitude about the workplace environment, and you can also apply that to management practices. Like, how do we manage people? And the way we manage, is it really inclusive?
Or Carol, how do we empower people, right? Like, are we giving people options and choices?
Exactly.
Can they control where they sit and or the level of distractions that they have? Or are you basically saying you have to sit right here? If I take somebody that cannot handle distractions or has a hard time connecting or gets gets overwhelmed easily, and I put them right on a corridor next to some really loud talkers, I've literally just set that person up for total failure.
Absolutely.
So empowering individuals to understand what their specific requirements and needs are, knowing that, and then letting them choose the right things, or maybe special technology that might support them, or being able to record meetings so they can play them back later, or putting them in a location that has some screening or buffering, or they can just get up and move when they're feeling overwhelmed. Those kinds of things are really, really important that will go a long way.
Yes, yes, they are.
Thank you, ladies. So we have another Menti question. Again, we will share the results at the end of the program once Stacy said the data is coming through, it's just not presenting. So we ask, how does your organization address neurodiversity today? This is always a fun graphic when it's live, but I can't wait to see when we're done how that looks.
Carol, what do you think? What do you think the choices, what do you think the vote's going to say?
Well, I'm really curious, to tell you the truth. What I find that when we first go into organizations, they are looking to us to provide them guidance on what they should be doing. And I really appreciate that openness on our clients' parts. And we find that for the most part, once they understand the reasons, the rationale for the requests around the various, whether it's workplace, physical, or management practices, or hiring and retention practices, they will make that effort, because they once they're educated and understand, they are very receptive.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of people that say, I don't know, not at all, or they're building awareness, because that's, I think, what we're finding. There are a few companies that have started to initiate for hiring, a few that have started to modify some of those processes, and I would say even fewer that have made physical alterations. So I think you get diminishing the farther you flip around to the left. I think you're going to see smaller results on this chart.
Thank you. Are there any aspects of neurodiverse individuals that need to be accommodated within our plans to return to office? And fingers crossed, as someone in corporate real estate, I can't wait till we return to office. In whatever form it may take.
Yeah. So Liz, I think the answer is yes. But I think it's the same kind of thing you would do for every individual, right? I think, we all kind of have this heightened sensitivity right now. And I think to accommodate people as we go back, we need to understand that different people are going to have different attitudes about this. They all are going to have a varying degree of sensitivities. Some people are going to be able to work better remotely, other people are not. So I think for certain sectors of a diverse population, being able to work remotely and not having to be in an environment that you're being distracted or overwhelmed could have been a real blessing. And the ability to work remotely could be a real blessing. For others who really thrive on the social interaction or want the direction or like being around others, and that's a really important aspect, they might have suffered and may want to be back in the workplace. And I think what we need to be able to do is understand that we have a varying degrees of sensitivity to spaces and to our environments, and create opportunities for, number one, for them to be addressed and discussed, and then for people to find the types of spaces and be able to navigate to them that really support what they need. So that might be more individualized spaces, remote spaces. That might be spaces that enable people to move a little bit more. And I want you just to think about this one example I'll give you. If I'm, for many of our clients, we're suggesting that, look, a lot of people have been sitting in one place for 12 hours and stuck, and our movement has plummeted. When we return to the office, wouldn't it be nice to be able to move around throughout the day, to be a little bit more physically active, to engage a little bit more, but also to have a little bit more control? Like if I'm sitting in a conference room and somebody comes and sits right next to me, and I'm very uncomfortable being that close to somebody, it would be hard for me to get up and move without it being obvious. But if we have standing height tables, maybe fewer chairs, so again, we're reducing cleaning, and people can move around naturally, and it doesn't seem as obvious, that I might be distancing myself a little bit from you or shifting over a little bit. That empowers movement. It gives people some control. It gives them more choice, and it's faster interactions. And I think we're all going to be longing for the opposite of what we're doing right now, which is sitting stagnantly in one place all day. So just a few of what could be many recommendations.
I'd like to add to that too. One of the areas of neurodiversity that we specialize in is autism, and with autism, there are social challenges that these individuals have, but it's easy to make the assumption that they prefer to work on their own. But what we have found is that 25% of people on the autism spectrum with these social challenges are suffering from isolation and depression from working at home, and they miss the social interactions at the office. And so the key thing here is as employers, not to make any assumptions about anyone, and just to be flexible and open-minded, that some people may prefer to work at home, some a combination, and some in the office. And what can help those people who prefer a combination is, if they are individuals who really like routine, that it may be scheduled, that on certain days of the week they're in the office, certain days of the week they work from home. And then,
and Carol, we talked about in the first session, right, that I think all of us have a little bit of creature of habit in us, some people much stronger than others, but there are certain individuals that really need predictability and varying, so the question at on the screen right now is, what do we need to be watchful for in a hybrid scenario? Hybrid meaning lots of options and choices. Sometimes people have variety anxiety, and we have to acknowledge that there are going to be a group of people that don't want that's actually overwhelming to them.
yes,
And you want to say, I want my spot, and I'm going to be there every day, and I need this predictability and routine and control. So flexibility and fluidity is one of the things everybody asks for, but it's not what everybody necessarily wants all the time.
Right. And they're not necessarily able to cope with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You ladies, I think everyone talks about hybrid. I'm not sure any of us actually know what hybrid is going to look like. So I will.
Well, I think we actually have I think there's actually a pretty good idea of that. I mean, how it actually will play out, Gretchen, I would agree 1,000%, and what people will actually do. We can, people are the wild card in all of this. But there are a lot of people that have been working in a hybrid way for many, many years. And I think what we're actually doing right now is acknowledging what has organically been evolving for a long time. And, I would say I've been a hybrid worker for probably 10 years, because I work some days at home. I go into the offices some days. I'm in airports. I'm traveling. And I think a larger percentage of people are going to be doing that. Now, I will say that I've surprised even myself on when I work, how I work, what's most effective, what I like and what I don't like. And so I think we're all going to have to be patient, and let's see how this plays out, because we cannot necessarily predict this. And I think you're correct on that, Gretchen. It's going to be hard to predict exactly how people are going to respond.
I was in the office yesterday, and on the way home, I was stuck in normal, what I would call normal traffic. And I jokingly, our building was far busier yesterday than it has been almost at any point in the pandemic, because everyone seems to decide that Thursday is the new day that they all want to come into the office. So I as someone who manages the workplace, I just am sort of saying to myself, yeah, Tuesday and Thursday traffic is going to be horrible, and Monday and Friday won't be so bad, right? But
Yeah.
I would assume for neurodiverse individuals, they might want some flexibility to, maybe they would prefer to come in on Monday and Friday, or as Kay was mentioning, or as Carol was mentioning, they may seek out those days that more people are there so that they have control over when their interactions happen.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So one of the trends that we have often seen pre-pandemic was free address environment, meaning non-assigned seats in the workplace. And our poll question at the moment is your company considering going to a free address system? And or did you implement one before the pandemic? And if so, are you going to keep that? I think this raises a lot of questions. Certainly from a cleaning perspective, we've heard some employees who are nervous about sharing desks and things like that.
Okay, so I have to push back on that one, Gretchen.
Uh-oh.
Because I'm going to tell you this, that there's so many misconceptions out there. Cleaning crews are routinely told, if there are papers out on the desk and or things on the desk, don't mess with them, don't touch them. And of course, the majority of assigned work points, people have that out there. And studies have shown that when you assign a desk to somebody, they rarely get cleaned because the cleaning people don't want to interrupt everything, and you've got all your tchotchkes out there. So most people's desks are dirtier than a toilet because they never get cleaned. And if you think because you have an assigned desk, it's less germy, that you still have people that are walking over, putting stuff on your desk, walking by you, interacting with you. There's this false perception that an individual dedicated desk is cleaner, and it's wrong, because study after study has shown that it's not. The other thing I think is that for people, again, I'm going to go back to this, for people that are neurodivergent, to be assigned a desk that you have no control over who you're sitting near or whatever, and to assume that that's the right desk for you for 8 hours a day, we have got to break that mold, because it isn't. We've got to start finding spaces like people or potted plants, and we need to give them options and choices and enable people to have it. And what we found in Asia, when people return to the workplace in Asia, they assigned desks because they thought that would make people feel more comfortable. What they found is people were really uncomfortable with that. And I'll give you a scenario and an example. If I were to walk into a doctor's office and there were 50 chairs in the doctor's office, and there were 3 people sitting in the waiting room, of those 50, and the nurse came over and said, "Oh, Miss Sargent, I'm so glad you're here. This is your assigned seat in the waiting area. You need to sit right here." And it happened to be right next to one of those individuals. I would look at her and be like, why do I have to sit next to this person? There's 40 other chairs that are open. I don't want to sit anywhere near this guy. I want to go sit as far away from possible. But in the workplace, we make people do that. It's the only place. And I think we need to break out of this paradigm and enable people really to have more choice. So we're seeing a ton of our clients right now. This is probably one of the biggest waves I've ever seen of activity-based working in North America that are asking for opportunity and options and choices. And one of those choices is to sit in the same spot every day if you want to. We don't encourage it, but you could.
We don't want people to sit for 12 hours a day anymore. I think that's the most important aspect of that. Certainly, as we talk about their physical health, but also as we talk about their mental health. And we are looking at what aspects of the workplace positively support mental health, particularly for neurodiverse individuals. Carol, do you want to speak to that one?
Yes, because this is a big issue among neurodivergent individuals, and part of the mental health aspect is feeling included. And this is a matter of, it's easy for people who are neurotypical to make assumptions. We all do that. And those assumptions, though, can actually do a lot of harm. So I'll give you an example where this one individual, top performing programmer, really brilliant young woman, and she was a really well-respected member of her team. Well, an event was planned. It was an after-hours event, and her colleagues, because she was on the spectrum and was maybe socially challenged, they just assumed she wouldn't be interested in going. So they did not include her in any discussions, and they did not feel that she was necessarily welcome to join them in that after hours event. Well, that affected her mental health because she actually wanted to go. And she didn't know how to go when her colleagues had made it a point of not discussing it around her and not asking her if she was going. So the key thing here is not to make any assumptions about what people want or don't want. And now the other aspect is more formalized approaches towards mental health. So what some organizations do is that they offer benefits, and sometimes the mental health support is phone-in support. But what happens with that is that that phone-in support, well-intentioned, doesn't necessarily have knowledge about the neurodivergent challenges the individual may have. So it's more of a generalized mental health support. And so organizations, we encourage organizations to look for mental health supports with knowledge of the specific neurodivergent diagnosis. So for example, if it's autism, then mental health support that is specialized in autism. And that typically then becomes really quite effective. The other is just having those breakout rooms where people can go for quiet time and just chill out on their own. Another is to have more frequent breaks, not as far as duration goes at the end of the day, they're not taking more time off, but they may be taking more frequent, shorter breaks just to get up, walk around, maybe even leave the office and walk around outside for a bit, come back in, they're recharged, they're ready to go. So all kinds of small ways in which mental health can be supported in a positive way. Okay, would you like to add?
Yeah, I'll tag in and just say that we really look at the elements and the principles of design, right? So space, massing, if you're in a space that feels too tight and confined, it can be overwhelming. If you're in a space where you feel, it's dehumanizing because it's so grand, it can be overwhelming. So, proportion and scale and harmony and rhythm, those principles are really important, but also the elements, right? So varied lighting, diffuse lighting that is softer and more natural. Access to natural daylight and biophilia is important. Color can impact individuals' shape and forms and patterns, right? So we know that people can think more creatively with organic materials and biomorphic shapes, etc. I mean, nowhere in nature is a rectangular white box that is evenly lit, yet that's what we put people in and wonder why they don't function well. And I think we need to really start creating environments that are less harsh, that are much softer, and that are much more in sync, and then give people the opportunity to go to a variety of spaces, whether it's, I might thrive in a buzzy space, or somebody else might really need to be in a very quiet, more controlled space that is more nestling. I mean, a lot of people that are neurodivergent need to be nestled. And so it's important that we're creating environments that support some of those instinctual needs.
Yes, to add to that, one of our biggest challenges when we go into a client site is if they have wide open office space where there are no places where somebody can just nestle in, to use your term, Kay. And people who are neurodivergent quite often look for that. Even if it's just a breakout space where they can experience that enclosure and comfort that comes from that.
Well, and Carol, I'm going to pick up on that, right? Because I can't tell you how many clients, we talk about these open, casual gathering spaces. And what they do is they throw 4 chairs in the middle of the open environment, and then they wonder why nobody sits there. Because you're just as exposed, and now you also look like you're not working, right? So it's really important if you can create alcoves or niches or little areas that people have some buffering or natural screening. They don't feel like they're on display, that they don't have to have their spidey senses about who's coming up behind me, right? All of those things I think are really important. And if we don't put people in those environments, they don't really relax and get to this mental state because they're constantly on alert and it's overwhelming to them.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's every person. We're not just talking about people that are neurodivergent here. I mean, I would say that 90% of what Carol and I are talking about applies to everyone.
Everybody. Yeah.
Carol, this is in your wheelhouse. I'm going to let you take this.
Yeah. So
this is what you do.
This is what we do. And so what we recommend is that you set up a partnership with a company, an organization that knows about neurodiversity. And they work with you, especially at the beginning of your journey, because there is a learning curve and you cannot expect to just know it. It's not necessarily intuitive. When I have 2 sons who are neurodivergent, and when they were first diagnosed, a professional phoned me who was a behavior consultant, and she said, "Okay, we're going to meet and set up a plan." And my question was, "Well, are you going to include them in the meeting?" And her response was, "Absolutely not. You're the one who needs to learn this." Employer is on a learning curve. There's no 2 ways about that. So we talk about building awareness, reaching out to your other companies in your industry who are experiencing neurodiversity, learning from them, and just being open to learning as much as you possibly can. So part of that is training, and it can be tricky because you set up training and awareness programs, and the very people who don't attend are the managers. So you want to set up special training sessions for them alone, and because that's at this more summary type training, and they're not in there with all of the employees learning at the same time, so they may feel more comfortable being trained as part of their own colleague set. So there's the awareness, there's the training, there's finding out what's happening, there's partnering, and really taking in what the experts say and internalizing it, and not being afraid to ask questions, because you will have lots of questions. Okay.
I'm going to say something that I have not said, and I can't even imagine how long. I have nothing to add to that, Carol. You covered it totally extensively, and this is your area of expertise. So nothing to add from me on that. I know Stacy and Gretchen, you guys are laughing, right? Because I don't think you've ever heard me say that, but there you go.
That's
I
why
am
I'm on
really-
mute.
Yeah, I'm rarely in a lack of words case.
I
so
know you're
I feel you. So one of the questions that we do need to talk about is how do we frame these discussions with management? Because that was one of the topics we're most interested in during the Real Advantage dinner.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick off because what I'm going to say is short. And again, I'm going to let Carol take the bulk of this question too, because this is again what she does. But I will say this, we've had lots of discussions with our clients who kind of want to jump right in and either address the space issue or the hiring issue or whatever. I think it's important that you understand why you're doing something and that you've got that commitment and that you take a holistic approach. You know, it really does need to be tackled on multiple fronts. It needs to be tackled from the HR side. It needs to be tackled from the corporate real estate side. It needs to be tackled from the operational side. You know, even FM or IT needs to be involved. And I think it was really interesting to me that in some of the discussions that we had in preparing for this, you know, one of the things that came up is, well, people in the real estate world may not know whether these initiatives are happening. And I said, my gosh, I hope that's not happening because they're the ones that have to create the environments that are going to welcome everybody and make them successful. And so I think the most important thing for me is that you have all the right people at the table because it takes everyone's participation to really truly make it successful.
I want to add a really interesting story. This is one of my experiences. So one of our clients was renovating their offices, major overhaul, you know, changing their cubicle structure, everything. And the supervisors of the department had a certain mindset about what they wanted. And it was the facilities department who came up to us and said, look, we need you to speak to what it is that they're proposing, because we're not convinced that what they're proposing takes into consideration a neurodivergent population. So we're going to set up a meeting and we want you to speak your truth from your knowledge. And so that is what happened. And as a result, facilities was then empowered to then do what was really necessary to make the workspace conducive and productive for those people who are neurodivergent, as well as everybody else. Whereas the managers in the department left to their own would have done something very different. And all the employees would have paid a price for it.
That's the best case I've ever heard for having qualified facilities management staff.
Yeah. But you see, they also needed to bring in an external expert, which, you know, was my organization, to help them build the case, you know, for it, which I found interesting. So even inside an organization, there's a certain power structure, and the power isn't always where it should be, as we all know.
So we have another poll question for our end users, and we are asking them if the discussions have started within their organization.
Now, I do want to add something to what Kay was saying, in that we have gone into organizations where we have not taken a holistic approach. And instead, what we have done is that we have helped a hiring manager bring one person in who is neurodivergent. And we have supported that person and the team and the stakeholders that the individual who is neurodivergent will be working with. And then what happens is that the rest of the organization is watching this, and they're keenly watching it, with a very critical eye. And then when it is successful, then HR, the management, everyone gets on board and says, this has been successful, way beyond anything we had imagined. And it's based on our experience in our workplace. So we can do this. So let's scale it up. So there is another way of approaching it. And I just want to put that out there.
So that's actually our last question.
Does that mean that we get to do we get to see the results, and or do we get to take some questions from the audience?
Taking questions, I'm gonna shut this off because I'm getting the results on my phone. So I'm not sure why it's not showing on the screen, but I will stop sharing, and hopefully there's some questions in the chat or the Q&A, sorry.
So Stacy, can you share with us how many of the individuals on this call attended the first one? Do you have that result?
Hold on.
While we're getting that, I will ask you ladies, one of the questions that came in during one of our dinners that we didn't cover was how real estate professionals can drive neurodiversity into action in the workplace.
Well, I mean, here's what I would say, and I don't like to say that neurodiversity is a disability, but Americans with Disabilities Act classifies it as that. And so if you get a knock on the door and somebody tells you, hey, I'm dyslexic, or I'm on the spectrum, or I have ADHD, you are required to address that in the workplace so that you can accommodate them. And I would say right now that most HR professionals and most corporate real estate and FM professionals probably would not know how to address that. And the likelihood, and you might say, well, I've never had that request before, so I probably will never get it. But I think the statistics show that 85 to 90% of adults that have ADHD don't even know that they have it or never officially diagnosed. We have a whole generation that has been raised understanding what their neurodiversity is and what the accommodations they might need that would help them are, and the stigmatism is starting to go away. And now we have a heightened sensitivity amongst everybody. And so this request is going to be coming in more likely. And you're going to have some people that are going to say, I need to work from home because of it, or I need this because of it, or, whatever. And so I think the chances that this, you're going to get that question just went up substantially, and you need to be prepared. Otherwise, you're potentially putting your organization at risk.
I would
That's a
agree.
really
I would
great
agree.
point, Kay. I think the younger generation definitely is more aware of this and more willing to speak to it, without a doubt. We do have a question in the Q&A, which is, how on a design team do you introduce neurodiversity concepts in space designs when you have a client who doesn't feel it's an important topic?
Well, hopefully what I just said helps you make them realize that it is an important topic. And the issue also is, it's not about who's coming into your organization. It is about who's already there that you're not serving well. Okay. And so when you start to see the statistics that we shared in the first one, and hopefully everybody that attends this one, because it looks like a lot of, probably about half the people on this call did not attend the first one. So hopefully we can share all of those statistics. But people that are, let's say ADHD, or dyslexic, people that are neurodiverse that are in work environments that don't support them tend to have like 18 times more likely to be a discipline problem. They tend to lose more sick days. They tend to have to take more time off. So it is impacting you. You just don't know it. And that's, I think, the important thing to realize.
So Kay, do you recommend that designers have those statistics handy and bring those to their clients as sort of a proactive approach when they're designing? 'Cause I'm
I highly recommend that they listen to the webinar that we did last time, that we shared all those stats in, and they have their people, they share it with their management and or their leadership and educate them. I think rarely when we have shared the material that we have created on neurodiversity, is there not a oh my God moment that most people have. It's like of the elephant in the room or the emperor with no clothes, and they realize, wow, how did we miss this all this time? And I think it's a real eye opener for people to understand and to realize this is impacting you. You just don't know it.
Right.
It should be.
And so it's that lack of awareness. And once the awareness is known, like once a person becomes aware, it's very difficult to become unaware again. And so they do tend to move in a positive direction around inclusivity.
So as we as designers, because I've always sort of worn a design hat as well as a facilities hat, begin the programming efforts with customers and clients, when your firm goes in to meet with them and you're talking about wellness, or you're talking about lead, or you're talking about other things that will play into the design of the space, that's the time to introduce, why neurodiversity matters when you're designing your space.
Yeah, and I would say it this way, Gretchen, because we actually make it a bigger issue than that, right? A lot of our clients are very focused on a very specific program. Some have, programs for people, individuals that are autistic or with autism. And I think what we need to do in many cases is take it up a little bit level. I mean, you can absolutely target if you want to and you're more sophisticated, but everybody in the workplace has sensory stimulation sensitivities. To what degree is what varies and impacts all of us. And again, I'm going to say we all have a heightened sensitivity right now. And what we often would do for people that are neurodiverse would also be some of the things we would recommend just for greater diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Different socioeconomic groups, different gender, racial, ethnic, etc. I think there's a whole lot of people that actually benefit from some of the things that we might be putting in place to address and to accommodate individuals that have special needs. Because quite frankly, we've always designed space like we're designing for the typical person. Well, who's the typical person anymore? I don't even know who the typical person is. We all have our, and we want people to bring their whole selves to the workplace, but we're not allowing them to do that. And so we actually really believe right now, there is a tremendous amount of focus on ESGs and, environmental, social, and governance and diversity and inclusivity. And every organization is talking about how we're going to address this. Well, how are you doing it? Like physically tell me, what are you doing? And creating and addressing these issues in the physical environment can be one big way to make your space more welcoming, period. Not just for neurodiverse, not just for different genders, not just for different racials, for everybody. And everybody. That's what we need to be doing. These are issues that affect every individual.
What we have found is that those managers, just to carry this off into management practices, that those managers who become adept at managing neurodivergent talent become better managers for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, ask them who's the typical person you're designing for. Right. Who is that? Is it a man? Is it a woman? What age are they? Who is this typical individual that you're designing for? I want to meet them.
And one of the points that I like to make, and how tall is that person?
And thank God they never age, right? Or never actually have a temporary disability, or never have a temporary affliction, and their mood never alters or changes throughout the day. Thank God for that too, right?
I always laugh a little bit when I try to explain to someone during an ergonomic evaluation that the height, the 28, 29-inch desk height that most desks are made at, stems from the size of paper that was standardized during World War II, because that's how big a file cabinet ended up being. And it was fine for a 6'2" man. but it's not fine for me, who's a woman and who's on the shorter side. So absolutely, who are these typical people? I want to know.
Yeah, like I want to be able to sit in a chair, my feet hit the ground. Thank you very much.
I've learned recently even crash test dummies come in different sizes and shapes now, which I think is pretty good, because they were finding that women in cars aren't, we sit lower in the seat. So they needed, and then they realized women have different shapes, shocker,
Yes.
but our body shapes are actually different than men. So it's not just our size. And that really does.
Right.
It is amazing. So Stacy, it looks
I
like
had
you've gotten the results to show up at least on your screen. So we'll be sharing those after the event. Were there any shockers in there, Stacy?
No. It was kind of all along the lines I expected it to be. Since I wrote the questions, I was like, yeah, this is where this is going to end up, but we'll definitely be able to save it. And actually, it might make sense for us to send that link out to anyone that was, on this webinar, because not a lot of people didn't vote. We were about half participation. So if we could get some more data, that would make me happy.
And we want to make you happy.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
I'm the typical neurodiverse person that likes data.
Okay, good. We like that.
Yes.
Perfect. So any other questions that we had from the audience?
I would just encourage anyone to type into the Q&A if they do have outstanding questions. I don't have any open at the moment.
So in the conversations that we were having before this, I thought it was really interesting and fascinating. Carol, you had noted that, you were working with several very large corporations about creating their programs. Can you just share with everybody what is a typical engagement? Like, okay, so let's say I've convinced everybody this is an important topic. We need to address this. We're going to hire, somebody to help us with our space and somebody to help us with this process. And they call you or whatever. What does that look like? What does that mean? What's the time frame? What do I envision here?
Well, the time frame varies from one organization to another. I mean, we've gotten into some situations where the client decides, bingo, we're doing this, okay, and we're doing it now. And usually that comes from the top down. And so then everybody is, okay, we're doing it. But then when it comes through more of an HR initiative, what we have found is that, and I'm speaking in generalities here, is that people who are in HR are fairly risk adverse. And so therefore the process takes longer because there is initially fear and apprehension. And so it's a matter of getting over that fear and apprehension. And that, again, that takes awareness training and time and answering lots of questions that come up through that process. Where things can really start to change, though, is when the organization starts meeting the people who are neurodivergent, because then it becomes very real. And it's, I mean, it's just human nature. We are social animals. And so we have a tendency that once we understand somebody else's behaviors and what is behind those behaviors, and we know and our preconceived assumptions were actually incorrect, we are then much more receptive to being open to that individual who presents differently. But now we understand what those differences are and why they are there. And I'll give you an example. Eye contact. There's a big deal culturally in North America that lack of eye contact shows a level of dishonesty or you're hiding something, when in fact, no, it could be that you have a sensory overload when you're listening and looking at the same time. So you're going to make a choice. You're going to listen and not look. because it's important for you to take in what is being said. And so therefore there's a lack of eye contact, but that's a sensory issue. It's not an issue around I'm hiding something.
So Carol, on that point, I'll tell you what I find really fascinating about what you just said. We are working with a major flooring manufacturer who approached us about a lot of the research that we've been doing and said they want us to help. And some of the reactions that we got, even within our own firm, were, what does neurodiversity have to do with flooring? And I think what we actually said that, and it really I think is important for everybody, but anything and everything that we can do to make space easy to navigate and intuitive is important, especially for individuals that don't necessarily want to lock eyes, and so they tend to look down a lot. And that also, if the flooring is overly confusing, you can get very easily disoriented, especially if you're being overwhelmed with all this other stuff, and then it's just like, oh my God, and you're looking down and you can get overwhelmed. Okay?
Yeah.
So having patterns in the flooring that aren't overwhelming, that aren't distracting, and that actually can help lead you through a space. Like if all the flooring is exactly the same, then you don't really know where am I supposed to be walking or where am I not, versus clearly having, like, whether it's all the pathways are carpeted and then maybe the other material is hard flooring or vice versa, whatever. Those things help people understand, or even putting area rugs under certain areas so that when I come up to that, I know this is kind of like the self-contained space. And it helps everybody
Yes.
in the space navigate, but it can really be important for individuals that rely on looking down or have a harder time be able to navigate a space successfully.
Right.
Hey, do you have any design resources that sort of, a playbook, if you will, for designers to be mindful? That was a terrific tip that you just shared about the flooring. And I know I've seen a lot of white papers, but I didn't know if there was sort of a IIDA group or anything that was focused on this.
No, there is, again, Gretchen, when we started this, we did all this, we hunted, and there was almost nothing out there. And so that's, in a sense, what really led us to do all the research that we have done. In the original book that we have, there is a ton of material in there, and then in the subsequent pieces that we have released. But I would say so far we've released 4 different reports, and we have only released about 30% of the research that we're doing. The bulk of the research that we're doing right now will be coming out in the near future. But there are absolute things in there that we say, here are some suggestions. And it's everything from, avoiding flickering lighting to, flooring patterns and, et cetera, all of these cues. And we're also developing that right now for how do we address the greater issue of social diversity and equity and inclusivity that go beyond just neurodivergence, but really address people of different, religious groups or ethnic groups or socioeconomic or, racial, gender, all of those things. And the list is pretty extensive of things you might want to consider, because most of them are not required by code, but things that you might want to consider to be more extensive, but we've kind of bucketed so it's manageable to do. So you're going to see more on that in the future too.
We had one more question in the Q&A, and that was, how this relates to people with early dementia. And it sounds like this would be very helpful in that environment as well.
So here's an interesting fact that we found. So the majority of the research, when we first started to really get into this, the majority of research we found 3 or 4 years ago didn't really talk at all about Parkinson's, which actually is an element of neurodiversity, but it is often one that is not talked a lot about because a lot of the research is geared towards K through 12 and or on, hiring in their early stage of the career. Most people that have Parkinson's you don't get diagnosed until you're in your 50s, and you don't really, the signs probably don't come out until you're in your 60s, at which point you might be taking a soft or an early retirement. And but the thing is that is the fastest growing sector in the neurodivergent world. And as we are living longer and working longer, and there are more things that are impacting us, whether it's chemicals in the environments or technology, whatever those things are that are impacting us and having an adverse effect, the more likely we are to be dealing with this going forward. And so we do talk about Parkinson's in our report. And again, I don't know if there's not a whole lot that we've identified so far that is, how do you specifically address this? There are a lot of things you could find in the healthcare realm where they're dealing with people that have early onsets of dementia and or Parkinson's, and the way that you can design it. The research we're working on right now, when we talk about age, will start to address some of those things. You start losing your hearing, your eyesight, your color, your perceptions. There's a whole variety of things. And how do we make space more intuitive and easy to navigate, and lead with clues, I think is really important. So you're going to see some of that is coming out, but that is a massive issue that we have not done as much work in, and specifically in the workplace realm. In the healthcare realm, I think they've done an excellent job. People like Jane Rohde, et cetera, have done an amazing job with all their research, Rosa Camera, that have done great work. But it's impacting us in the workplace too, and we need to address it.
Yes, and one of the areas around early dementia has to do with memory and memory loss and short-term memory loss, and the ability to plan and organize. Those skills can be at risk, and there are lots of tools out there that can help those individuals. And so it becomes, what is the toolkit that the organization has available, and what toolkit does the individual bring into the workplace as well, and to make those tools accessible.
Thank you both so very much. This has been a fantastic series, and I know that you have opened up my mind, and I think all of our attendees' mind in both sessions, to understanding neurodiversity and how it impacts the workplace. On behalf of Stacy, myself, and the whole EID team, we're really thrilled that you guys have volunteered your time to help educate us in the corporate real estate world. Stacy will have the Mentimeter results available for us after this. I know if you typed your email in, you can get a copy of them. I was able to log on and do that. So they're relatively fascinating. And our EID initiative is an ongoing initiative. So our next sessions are in the works now, and we will be presenting those in the next few months. At the end of this Zoom session, you will see a survey pop up at the end that will ask you about your experience and help us craft the next series of programming. So I do ask everyone to submit those when the questions pop up. And I'll turn it back over to Stacy and Mark if they have anything to add.
I actually don't have anything to add. We covered it all. We, conducted our first session, got a bunch of feedback during our Real Advantage dinner, and this was the meat of the topic after that dinner, and I'm really happy and very grateful to all of these ladies for pulling this together with me.
Happy to. And Stacy, can I ask a quick question? I think we shared some links with you to all the reports and things like that we've referred to, since about 50% of the people in this session did not attend the first one. Can we automatically send them that material and the first session so they have the benefit of exploring deeper?
We can direct them right to the CoreNet website where the recording is housed.
Perfect. Thank you.
All I have to add is another great program. Thank you. And if there are any recommendations for any other programs, please let us know. I believe our next program is going to be on supplier diversity. So we'll continue to look at ways to provide relevant programs to the CoreNet membership. Have a great weekend.
And
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for inviting me in to participate. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you again. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.